a poor girl shouted at a millionaire. "Don't drink that, your girlfriend put poison in it." But when he went home to talk to her, he was horrified by what he saw her doing. At the exclusive restaurant, the Silver Crown, located in the heart of New York City, raindrops gently tapped against the windows as Edward Morgan, one of the country's most influential businessmen, prepared for a special evening with his fiancée, Victoria Sinclair. The atmosphere of the place exuded elegance: cut crystal chandeliers, white linen tablecloths, and a soft piano melody floating in the air. Victoria, in her designer black dress and pearl necklace, was the epitome of sophistication. However, behind her perfect smile and refined manners, a dark secret was hidden that was about to be revealed in the most unexpected way. "Tonight is special, my love," Victoria whispered as the waiter poured the red wine they had just ordered. "I've prepared a surprise for you." Her fingers, adorned with diamond rings, nervously played with the cloth napkin. Edward, dressed in a tailored suit, smiled with genuine affection. At 45, he believed he had finally found true love. After years of loneliness and distrust, Victoria had appeared in his life like a ray of light, or at least that's what he thought until that moment. "What kind of surprise?" Edward asked, intrigued by his fiancée's slightly nervous behavior. "First, let's toast," she replied, taking the wineglass between her fingers. For an instant, while Edward was distracted looking at the menu, Victoria slipped something into his glass with a movement so subtle that it would have gone unnoticed by anyone, except for a pair of attentive eyes watching from across the room. Among the tables of the luxurious restaurant, a girl no more than 12 years old, with messy hair and a worn dress, had snuck in to shelter from the rain. The waiters, busy with distinguished clients, hadn't noticed her presence in a dark corner. But she had noticed everything. The little girl, who went by the name of Luna, had developed a keen sense of observation after years of living on the streets. She clearly saw when Victoria took something out of her purse and poured it into Edward's glass while he wasn't looking. Luna's heart began to beat hard. She knew she had to do something. "Now, my love, to our future together," Victoria said, raising her glass and waiting for Edward to do the same. Edward took his glass, bringing it to his lips, when suddenly, "Don't drink that! Your girlfriend put something in your glass." Luna's shrill cry cut through the elegant dining room like lightning, freezing time and space. The silence that followed was deafening. All conversations ceased. Cutlery hung suspended in the air, and dozens of eyes turned to the table where Edward and Victoria were seated. The crystal glass trembled in Edward's hand as he slowly moved it away from his lips, looking alternately at Victoria and the small intruder. What does this mean?" Edward asked, his voice barely a whisper. Victoria paled for an instant, but quickly regained her composure. "How absurd! How can they allow a vagrant to come in here and ruin customers' dinners?" "Security!" she exclaimed, trying to divert attention. But Edward couldn't take his eyes off the glass. With a deliberate movement, he placed it on the table and stared intently at Victoria. In his eyes, decades of business experience had taught him to recognize when someone was lying, and at that moment, Victoria's face was an open book. "Edward, my love, you won't believe the words of a street child over mine, will you?" Victoria pleaded, trying to take his hand across the table. Edward firmly withdrew his hand. "The problem, Victoria, isn't her words, it's your reaction to them." He slowly rose from the table, his imposing figure casting a shadow over the white tablecloth. "This dinner is over, as is our engagement." Victoria began to protest, but Edward had already turned around, searching with his eyes for the little girl who had possibly saved his life. However, amid the chaos that had erupted in the restaurant, Luna had disappeared as mysteriously as she had appeared, leaving behind only unanswered questions and the echo of her warning resonating in Edward's mind. As the waiters and restaurant staff tried to restore order, Edward remained standing, watching the rain through the windows. Who was that girl? Why had she risked warning him? And more importantly, what would have happened if she hadn't been there that night? The days following the incident at the Silver Crown became a haze of questions for Edward Morgan. Sitting in his office on the top floor of a skyscraper in Manhattan with a panoramic view of the city, he couldn't concentrate on the documents in front of him. His mind kept returning to the image of that mysterious girl who had appeared out of nowhere to warn him. "Mr. Morgan, you have a call from Miss Sinclair on line 2, his secretary announced through the intercom. "I'm not taking any calls from Victoria," Edward responded firmly. He had already blocked her numbers and returned all her gifts, but she kept persisting through different means. The rain, which seemed to have settled permanently in the city since that night, beat against the windows of his office. Edward rose from his leather chair and walked to the window, observing the wet streets 30 floors below. Somewhere in that vast city was the little girl who had opened his eyes. "Carol," he called to his secretary, "cancel all my afternoon meetings. There's something I need to do." Half an hour later, Edward parked his black Mercedes in front of the Silver Crown. The restaurant was practically empty at that time of day, and the maitre d' greeted him with a nervous bow, aware of the scandal days before. "Mr. Morgan, it's an honor to have you back. Please let me assure you that we have strengthened our security measures and—" "I'm not here for that," Edward interrupted. "I need information about the girl who came in that night. Does anyone know her? Do they know where she came from?" The maitre d' exchanged glances with some waiters who had discreetly approached. A young waitress, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. "I've seen her before, sir," she said softly. "She sometimes comes around here, especially when it rains. She takes shelter in the alley behind the restaurant, next to Mr. Ramirez's bakery." Edward took out his wallet and extracted several high-denomination bills. "Could you show me exactly where?" The waitress guided him through the kitchen to a back door that led to a narrow alley. The place was partially protected from the rain by a worn awning, and there were some empty boxes stacked against the wall. "Sometimes Mr. Ramirez gives her bread from the day before," the waitress explained. "He says the girl is polite and never causes trouble. She just comes, sits there for a while, and then disappears." Edward observed the space carefully. Among the boxes he could make out a small worn backpack and some carefully folded old newspapers. Someone had created an improvised shelter. "When was the last time you saw her?" "Early this morning," a new voice answered. It was the baker, Mr. Ramirez, who had peeked out the back door of his shop. "She came for a sweet roll, as always. I gave her a hot chocolate, too. With this cold—" Edward felt a tightness in his chest. The girl who had possibly saved his life was living in these conditions, exposed to the cold and rain. "Do you know where she goes during the day?" Edward asked. "Sometimes I see her in Central Park near the fountain," Mr. Ramirez replied. "She has an old notebook where she draws. She's a special girl, Mr. Morgan. There's something in her eyes, a wisdom that doesn't match her age." Edward thanked them for the information and left his business card with the baker and the waitress. "If you see her, please tell her Edward Morgan wants to talk to her. It's important." As he walked back to his car, Edward noticed that the rain had eased a bit. A ray of sunlight filtered through the clouds, illuminating the puddles on the pavement. In one of them he thought he saw the reflection of a small figure watching him from the corner, but when he turned, there was no one there. However, something told him he was close to finding her. The city was big, but fate had intertwined their paths for some reason. And Edward Morgan, the man who had built an empire based on his intuition, felt that this was just the beginning of a much bigger story than he could imagine. He got into his car and programmed the GPS towards Central Park. If the girl was there, he would find her, and if not, he would keep searching until he found her. He owed her more than a thank you. He owed her answers to the questions that had been swirling in his mind since that rainy night. Central Park stretched out like a green oasis in the midst of Manhattan's urban bustle. Edward walked slowly along its paths, observing every bench, every corner, looking for any sign of the mysterious girl. The central fountain shot jets of water into the air, creating a rainbow with the last rays of the afternoon sun. After half an hour of fruitless searching, he sat on a bench overlooking the fountain. Around him, families strolled with their children, elderly couples fed pigeons, and street vendors hawked their wares. The normalcy of the scene contrasted dramatically with the whirlwind of thoughts in his mind. "Why would someone want to harm me?" he muttered to himself, remembering the wine glass and Victoria's look that night. His reflections were interrupted by the sound of a pencil falling and rolling to his feet. As he bent to pick it up, he noticed it was a worn pencil, chewed on one end with small marks from childish fingers. When he looked up, there she was. The girl was watching him from a few meters away, with a mixture of caution and curiosity in her large brown eyes. She wore the same worn dress from that night in the restaurant, but now Edward could see her more clearly. Her long black hair was pulled back in a messy braid, and her shoes, though clean, were visibly worn. "Is this yours?" Edward asked softly. extending the pencil towards her. The girl nodded but didn't move from her spot. Her eyes studied Edward's every movement, like a small wild animal assessing whether to trust or flee. "My name is Edward," he continued, maintaining a calm tone. "I've been looking for you. I wanted to thank you for what you did at the restaurant." "It was nothing," she replied in a low voice, taking a small step forward. "I just did what was right. What's your name?" "Luna," she answered after a brief pause, "like the moon that shines at night." Edward noticed that, despite her situation, there was a natural dignity in her way of speaking and behaving. "Luna, would you like to sit down? I promise to stay exactly where I am." The girl considered the offer for a moment before approaching with cautious steps. She sat at the opposite end of the bench, maintaining a prudent distance. "How did you know about the glass?" Edward asked, handing her the pencil. Luna took the pencil and carefully stored it in a worn notebook she carried with her. "I saw her. When you were looking at the menu, she took something out of her purse. I had seen it before. Bad people doing things like that." A chill ran down Edward's spine. "Bad people? Have you seen things like this before?" Luna nodded slowly, her eyes lost in the fountain in front of them. "On the streets, you see everything, Mr. Edward. Some are good, like Mr. Ramirez, who gives me bread, or Mrs. Carmen from the laundromat, who lets me sleep in her doorway when it rains really hard. Others—" Her voice trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. "Luna, where is your family?" Edward asked gently. The girl hugged her notebook to her chest. "I don't have one, or maybe I do, but I don't know them. I grew up in St. Mary's orphanage until—" She stopped abruptly, as if she had said more than she intended. Edward felt his heart shrink. "How long have you been living on the street?" 2 years, 3 months, and 12 days, she replied with a precision that surprised Edward. "But I'm okay, I know how to take care of myself." "No one should be alone," Edward said, more to himself than to her. "Luna, would you let me help you?" The girl looked at him with a mixture of hope and distrust. "Why would you want to help me? You're rich, important. Rich people don't help without wanting something in return." "You helped me without asking for anything in return," Edward replied with a soft smile. "Why did you do it?" Luna seemed to reflect on the question. "Because it was the right thing to do," she finally repeated. "And because—" She hesitated a moment before continuing. "Because you have kind eyes, like the ones I imagine my dad would have." Luna's words hit Edward with unexpected force. In his 45 years of life, no one had been as sincere and direct with him as this little street girl. A distant thunder announced the proximity of another storm. The families in the park began to pack up their things, preparing for the impending rain. "It's going to rain," said Luna, getting up from the bench. "I should go." "Wait." Edward also stood up. "At least let me take you to a safe place, please." Luna looked at the sky, then at Edward, and finally at her worn notebook. The first raindrops began to fall, forming dark circles on the park's pavement. The rain intensified as Edward's black Mercedes navigated the city streets. Luna remained silent in the back seat, her small figure reflected in the tinted windows. Edward observed her through the rearview mirror, noticing how her eyes scanned every detail of the luxurious car interior with amazement. "Where are we going?" Luna finally asked, not letting go of her notebook. "I know a place where you can be safe," Edward replied. "It's a hotel near here. You can rest, take a hot bath, and eat something." "I don't need charity," Luna murmured, though her stomach betrayed her with an audible growl. Edward smiled softly. "It's not charity, Luna. It's gratitude. You saved me from something terrible, remember?" The car stopped in front of the Ritz-Carlton, one of the most exclusive hotels in the area. Luna looked at the imposing facade with apprehension. "I can't go in there," she said, looking at her worn dress. "I don't belong in this place." "We all belong where we're treated with respect," Edward replied firmly. "Besides, I own part of this hotel. No one will look at you badly, I promise." At the reception, the staff hurried to attend to them, though Edward noticed the curious glances they directed at Luna. With a mixture of authority and discretion, he requested an executive suite and ordered a complete selection from the children's menu to be sent up. "Isabel," he called to the hotel manager, a middle-aged woman with a kind expression. "Could you please get some suitable clothes for the young lady? And personal care items as well." Once in the suite, Luna stood in the middle of the living room, as if afraid to touch anything. Her eyes scanned the luxurious curtains, elegant furniture, and the panoramic view of the city. "You can sit down," Edward encouraged her. "This is a safe place." Luna sat cautiously on the edge of an armchair. "Why are you doing this, Mr. Edward?" "The truth." Edward sat across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Because you made me remember something important, Luna. That in this world, selfless kindness still exists. You didn't know me, but you risked your safety to warn me. That means a lot to me." A soft knock on the door announced Isabel's arrival with several bags of clothes and personal items. Shortly after, the cart with dinner arrived. "There's a full bathroom in the bedroom," Edward explained. "You can take a hot shower and change. Isabel will help you if you need anything. I'll be back early tomorrow if you'll allow me." Luna looked at the food, the new clothes, and then at Edward. Her eyes filled with unshed tears. "How do I know I can trust you?" "You don't," Edward replied honestly. "Just as I didn't know if I could trust you that night at the restaurant. Sometimes, Luna, trust is a leap of faith." The girl nodded slowly, understanding. "Do you promise you'll come back tomorrow?" "I give you my word," Edward responded, taking a card from his wallet. "This is my personal number. You can call me anytime if you need anything. Isabel will also be looking after you all night." As Edward headed for the door, Luna called out to him, "Mr. Edward, thank you, and be careful. Your ex-girlfriend, Miss Victoria. I saw her in the park today before you arrived. She was asking people about you." Edward stopped in his tracks. "Victoria was in the park? What else did you see, Luna?" "She was talking to a man who didn't seem very nice. She looked angry, very angry." Luna hugged her notebook tighter. "That's why I hid when you arrived. I didn't want her to see me." Edward felt a chill run down his spine. Victoria wasn't someone who gave up easily, and the restaurant incident must have humiliated her deeply. What could she be planning? "Thank you for telling me, Luna. Don't worry, you'll be safe here. We'll talk more calmly about all this tomorrow." As he left the hotel, Edward couldn't help but look over his shoulder several times. The rain had ceased, but a sense of unease lingered in the air. Somewhere in the city, Victoria was plotting her revenge, and something told him this was just the beginning. Victoria Sinclair contemplated the city from her penthouse in the Upper East Side, her fingers nervously drumming on a glass of red wine. The failure of her plan at the restaurant had left her in a vulnerable position, and if there was one thing Victoria hated, it was feeling vulnerable. "Are you sure about what you're telling me?" she asked the man sitting across from her, a private investigator she had hired to follow Edward. "Completely, Miss Sinclair. Mr. Morgan spent the whole afternoon looking for that girl, first at the restaurant, then in Central Park. He finally found her and took her to the Ritz-Carlton." Victoria brought the glass to her lips, her eyes narrowed in reflection on this information. A street girl? What interest could Edward have in her? "According to my sources, she's the same one who alerted him that night at the restaurant," the investigator replied, consulting his notes. The crystal of the glass creaked under the pressure of Victoria's fingers. That little meddler, she ruined everything. Years of planning, destroyed in an instant by a street urchin. She stood up from her seat and walked to the window, observing the city lights that were beginning to turn on at dusk. Her reflection in the glass returned a determined look. "I need you to find out everything about that girl, where she comes from, her story, everything. There must be something we can use." Meanwhile, at the Ritz-Carlton, Luna was experiencing for the first time in years what it was like to sleep in a soft, clean bed. After a hot bath and an abundant dinner, she had put on the new pajamas that Isabel had brought her. Everything seemed like a dream from which she feared waking up. She approached the window of the suite, observing the same city that Victoria contemplated, but with very different eyes. In her hands, she held her precious notebook, now accompanied by a set of new pencils that Isabel had given her. She opened the notebook to a particular page where she had drawn something she hadn't shown Edward, a portrait of Victoria in the park, talking to that mysterious man. Luna had a special gift for capturing details, and there was something in Victoria's expression that deeply disturbed her. The sound of her new phone, another gift from Edward, startled her. It was a message. "Just wanted to make sure you're comfortable. Rest well, little one, tomorrow will be a new day. Edward." Luna smiled, but her smile faded when lightning illuminated the sky, casting unsettling shadows in the room. She approached her old backpack, which she had insisted on keeping, and took out an object that no one else had seen, an old locket with a faded photograph inside. The image showed a young woman holding a baby. On the back, a barely legible inscription, "For my dear niece Elena, with all my love, your Aunt Margaret Morgan." Luna had never shown the locket to anyone. She had found it among her few belongings at the orphanage, and something told her she should keep it a secret. Now, looking at the surname engraved on the metal, a strange feeling came over her. Could it be possible that a new thunderclap made her jump, and she quickly put the locket back in her backpack? She curled up in bed, wrapped in the soft hotel sheets, while her mind spun between the present and fragments of a past she barely remembered. In his office, Edward also remained awake, reviewing old family albums. Luna's name had awakened a distant memory, something about a cousin who had distanced herself from the family years ago. Margaret Morgan. Why did that name sound so familiar? He took his phone and dialed a number. "George, I know it's late, but I need you to investigate something for me. Look in the family archives for everything related to Margaret Morgan. And I also need the complete information on St. Mary's Orphanage." The rain began to fall again over New York City, while 3 people in different places remained awake, each holding a different piece of a puzzle that was beginning to take shape. The next morning dawned with a clear sky, as if the previous night's storm had washed away all the city's secrets. Edward arrived early at the Ritz-Carlton, carrying a folder with documents and a box of pastries from Mr. Ramirez's bakery. Upon entering the suite, he found Luna already awake, sitting at the small desk by the window, drawing intently in her notebook. She had put on one of the new dresses Isabel had gotten, and her hair, now clean and combed, shone under the morning sunlight. "Good morning, Luna," Edward greeted softly so as not to startle her. "Did you sleep well?" Luna looked up from her drawing and smiled timidly. "Better than ever, Mr. Edward. Isabel brought me breakfast a while ago, but—" Her eyes lit up when she saw the pastry box. "Is that from Mr. Ramirez's bakery?" "I thought you'd like something familiar," Edward replied, placing the box on the table. "Mr. Ramirez sends his regards and says he misses his most loyal customer." As Luna savored a pastry, Edward noticed the open notebook on the desk. On the visible page was a detailed drawing of Central Park, but what caught his attention was a familiar face in one corner, Victoria depicted with unsettling accuracy. "You have a special gift for capturing details," he commented, pointing to the drawing. Luna quickly closed the notebook, as if she had been caught. "I like observing people," she murmured. "It helps to know who to trust." Edward sat across from her, placing the folder on the table. "Luna, there's something I need to ask you. Last night you mentioned St. Mary's Orphanage. Do you remember anything about how you got there?" The girl put down the half-eaten pastry, and her expression turned serious. "Not much. I was very young. The sisters said they found me at the door one rainy night, like in storybooks. I only had a small backpack with some clothes and—" She stopped abruptly, as if she had been about to reveal something important. Edward noticed her hesitation. "And what else, Luna? You can trust me." Luna stared at him for a few moments, as if evaluating his sincerity. Finally, she got up and went to her old backpack, which rested in a corner. With trembling hands, she took out the locket and showed it to Edward. Time seemed to stand still as Edward took the locket in his hands. His eyes widened as he recognized the face in the photograph. "Margaret," he whispered, almost breathless. "Do you know her?" Luna asked, her voice barely audible. Edward nodded slowly, opening the folder he had brought with him. He took out an old photograph showing a group of people at what appeared to be a family gathering. "Margaret Morgan was my cousin," he explained, pointing to a young woman in the image. "She disappeared years ago, after a family dispute over my grandfather's inheritance." Luna moved closer, studying the photograph intently. "What happened to her?" "The family was divided over a very valuable property, the Cypress Grove estate." Edward took a deep breath before continuing. "Margaret was pregnant when she left. No one heard from her again except rumors. Rumors that she had had a girl. The silence that followed was deafening." Luna looked alternately at the locket and the photograph while her mind tried to process the information. "Luna," Edward spoke softly, "do you know what this could mean?" Before Luna could answer, Edward's phone rang urgently. It was George, his private investigator. "Mr. Morgan, I found something about St. Mary's Orphanage. It was closed 2 years ago due to irregularities, but there's something else." Victoria Sinclair appears in the records as the main benefactor of the orphanage for the last 5 years. Edward felt the ground move beneath his feet. The pieces were starting to fit together in a way he hadn't anticipated. Victoria had not only tried to hurt him at the restaurant, she had been involved in Luna's life long before their paths crossed on that rainy night. "There's more, sir," George continued. "I've just received information that Miss Sinclair has been asking questions about Cypress Grove Estate. She seems very interested in the original property documents." Luna, who had been observing Edward's increasingly worried expression, approached and gently took his hand. "Mr. Edward, there's something else I should show you," she said, opening her notebook to a specific page. "I've been drawing the dreams I have about a big house with cypress trees. I always thought it was my imagination, but now..." Luna spread her notebook on the table, showing a series of detailed drawings that occupied several pages. Each one represented different angles of a majestic estate, surrounded by tall cypress trees. The drawings were surprisingly precise to have been created from dreams. Edward contemplated the images with a mixture of amazement and contained emotion. "It's incredible," he murmured, carefully turning the pages. "These details, the fountain in the main garden, the porch columns, even the design of the windows. Everything is exactly as I remember it." "So it's real?" Luna asked, her eyes shining with a mixture of hope and fear. "The house in my dreams exists?" Edward took out his tablet from his briefcase and, after searching for a few moments, showed her a photograph. Cypress Grove Estate, as it was 15 years ago, before it was closed. Luna held her breath. The image on the tablet was practically identical to her drawings, down to the smallest detail. "But how is this possible?" "The deepest memories sometimes hide in our dreams, Luna," Edward replied softly, "especially those from our early childhood." At that moment, Isabel gently knocked on the suite door. "Mr. Morgan, excuse the interruption, but there's something you need to see." Edward apologized to Luna and stepped out into the hallway. Isabel handed him a tablet with the day's local news. The main headline made his heart skip a beat. "Historical documents of Cypress Grove Estate mysteriously disappear from the public property registry." "This is no coincidence," Edward muttered, returning the tablet to Isabel. "Please double the security on this floor, and don't allow access to anyone without my express authorization." Upon returning to the suite, he found Luna standing by the window, hugging her notebook to her chest. "There's something else I should tell you," the girl said without turning around. "About the night I left the orphanage." Edward approached and sat in a nearby armchair, giving her space but showing he was willing to listen. "That night," Luna began, "I overheard a conversation between the Mother Superior and a woman. They were talking about important documents and about a girl who should never know her true identity. The woman, her voice was like Miss Victoria's." Edward felt a chill run down his spine. "What else do you remember from that conversation?" "They mentioned something about an inheritance and a deadline that was coming soon. The woman seemed very angry. She said that if the girl ever discovered the truth, all her plan would fall apart." Luna finally turned, her eyes full of unshed tears. "That night, when everyone was asleep, I took my backpack and escaped. I was scared, but something inside me told me I had to leave." Edward was processing this information when his phone vibrated with a message from George. "Urgent. Victoria Sinclair has just filed a legal claim for ownership of Cypress Grove Estate. She says she has documents proving the property was legally ceded to her years ago." "Luna!" Edward stood up and approached the girl. "I need you to trust me one more time. You're not safe here. Victoria is moving her pieces faster than I thought." "Where will we go?" Luna asked, noticing the urgency in his voice. "To the only person who can help us decipher all of this," Edward replied, beginning to gather Luna's belongings. "My Aunt Rose, Margaret's older sister. She lives in Greenwich and is the only one who knows the whole family story." As they hurriedly packed things into a new suitcase, Luna suddenly stopped. "Mr. Edward, do you think I'm really part of your family?" Edward knelt down to be at her eye level and looked directly into her eyes. "Luna, from the moment you risked your safety to save me in that restaurant, you showed you have the heart and courage of a true Morgan. The documents and evidence will only confirm what I already feel in my heart." A new message from George interrupted the moment. "Victoria was seen leaving the airport. She's heading to Greenwich." Edward took Luna's hand. "We have to go, now." Edward's black Mercedes wound its way along the highway towards Greenwich, leaving New York City shrouded in the morning mist behind. Luna watched the changing landscape from the back seat, hugging her precious notebook and the locket now hanging from her neck. "What is she like?" Luna asked after a long silence. "Your Aunt Rose. My great-aunt." Edward smiled as he adjusted the rear-view mirror. Rose Morgan is a force of nature. She's 75 years old but has the energy of a young woman. She lives in a house full of family photographs and memories, and she has a prodigious memory. She never forgets a face or a story. "Do you think she'll remember me?" Luna's voice trembled slightly. "Luna, if you are who we think you are, Rose has never forgotten you. She's been looking for you for years." Edward's phone rang through the car's system. It was George again. "Mr. Morgan, Victoria arrived in Greenwich half an hour ago. She rented a car at the airport and is heading towards the city centre. Any sign of the missing documents?" "Not yet, but there's something else. I found records of regular bank transfers from the orphanage to an account in the Cayman Islands. The transfers began exactly when Victoria became a benefactor." Luna leaned forward in her seat. "The sisters always said the benefactor was an angel sent by God, but they never let us see her when she visited the orphanage. She would lock herself in the Mother Superior's office for hours." Edward frowned. "George, I need you to investigate everything about the Mother Superior of the orphanage, her history, her connections, everything." "I'm already on it, sir. And be careful. Victoria isn't alone in this. She's been meeting with some lawyers known for handling complicated cases." After ending the call, Edward noticed that Luna had started drawing again in her notebook. This time she was recreating the orphanage scene she had mentioned. "Have you always drawn like this?" Edward asked, trying to maintain a light conversation while watching the road. "As far as I can remember," Luna replied, without looking up from her drawing. "The sisters said it was a gift from God, but they didn't like me drawing real people, especially after I drew Miss Victoria leaving the office one night." Edward almost slammed on the brakes. "You drew her? Do you have that drawing?" Luna nodded and flipped through some pages of her notebook until she found the drawing in question. The image showed Victoria leaving an office, holding what appeared to be old documents. The level of detail was astonishing. "Luna, this is very important. Do you remember what kind of documents they were?" "They had a gold seal," Luna replied, closing her eyes as if trying to better visualize the memory. "And there was an old photograph falling from one of them, a photograph of the estate. The GPS announced they were 20 minutes from their destination." Edward accelerated slightly, aware that they were in a race against time. "Mr. Edward," Luna said suddenly, "why is Miss Victoria so interested in the estate? Why was she looking for me at the orphanage?" Edward sighed deeply. "Cypress Grove Estate isn't just any property, Luna. Under its lands there's something very valuable that my grandfather discovered years ago, something that could be worth a fortune. But in his will he stipulated that the estate could only be inherited by his direct descendants. And if you're Margaret's daughter, as we believe, you're the rightful heir to everything. Victoria must have discovered it somehow and has been manipulating things from the shadows for years." Luna remained silent for a moment, processing the information. Then, with a maturity that surprised Edward, she said, "I don't care about the estate or what's under it. I just want to know who I really am and why my mother left me." Edward felt his heart shrink at those words. "I promise we'll find all the answers, Luna. And whatever happens, you're not alone anymore." As they entered Greenwich, Edward's phone vibrated with a text message. Victoria just arrived at Mrs. Rose's house. Edward gripped the steering wheel tightly. The race for the truth had begun, and they couldn't afford to lose. Rose Morgan's house was an elegant colonial mansion in the heart of Greenwich, surrounded by a lush garden that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. Edward parked the Mercedes a street away, observing Victoria's rental car parked in front of the main entrance. "Luna," Edward turned to the back seat, "I need you to be very brave. Do you trust me?" The girl nodded, clutching her notebook to her chest. "What are we going to do?" "There's a side entrance that leads to the kitchen. Mary, the housekeeper, is completely trustworthy. She'll help us get in without Victoria seeing us." As they walked discreetly down the side alley, they could hear voices coming from the main living room. Victoria's voice sounded tense, almost threatening. "Mrs. Rose, be reasonable. These documents prove that the estate legally belongs to me." I just need your signature as the last living heir of the family." The response came in the form of a soft but firm laugh. "My dear Victoria, I've been reasonable for 75 years, and in all those years I've learned to recognize when someone is trying to deceive me." Edward and Luna reached the kitchen door, where Mary was already waiting for them. The older woman stifled a gasp when she saw Luna, bringing her hands to her mouth. "Holy Virgin," she whispered. "She's identical to Margaret when she was a little girl." "Mary," Edward interrupted in a low voice, "where's my aunt?" "In the main living room with that woman. But Mr. Edward, there's something you should know. Your aunt was expecting you. She told me this morning that today would be a special day, that the family would be complete again." Luna looked at Edward with questioning eyes, but he was focused on the sounds coming from the living room. "The documents are fake, Victoria." Rose's voice sounded increasingly firm. "Just like your supposed love for my nephew Edward. Fake? I have witnesses, notaries who will confirm their authenticity. Do you really want to take this to court, Mrs. Rose? At your age? Are you threatening me, dear? How adorable. But you forget something fundamental about the Morgans. We don't scare easily." Edward signaled Luna to wait in the kitchen with Mary, but the girl shook her head. "No," she whispered. "I need to face this too." Together they silently approached the arch connecting the kitchen to the main living room. From there they could see the entire scene. Victoria, elegantly dressed but with an air of desperation on her face, was standing showing some documents. In front of her, seated in an antique armchair as if it were a throne, Rose Morgan exuded a dignity and calmness that contrasted with her visitor's agitation. "The original estate documents," Rose continued, "have a special watermark that my father had made, a precaution he took precisely to avoid situations like this." Victoria paled slightly, but recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about. These are the original documents." "Really?" Rose smiled, pointing to an antique mahogany desk. "Why don't we compare them with the ones I keep in that drawer, the real documents, which have been here all this time?" Victoria moved quickly towards the desk, but stopped short when she saw Edward and Luna emerging from the shadows. "The game is over, Victoria," Edward said firmly. But it was Rose's voice that filled the room with emotion contained for years. "Elena, my little Elena." Luna took a step forward, confused. "Elena, that's your real name, my child," Rose replied, extending her arms towards her. "Eleanor Margaret Morgan, the daughter of my dear niece. I've waited for you for so long." Victoria retreated towards the door but found Mary blocking her exit. "You're not going anywhere, miss," said the housekeeper firmly. "The police are already on their way." Luna, or Eleanor, as she had just discovered she was called, took another step towards Rose but stopped, looking at the locket around her neck. "The locket," Rose said with tears in her eyes. "I'd recognize it anywhere. I gave it to Margaret myself the day her baby was born." The silence that followed Rose's revelation was interrupted only by the soft tinkling of the locket between Elena's fingers. Victoria remained motionless by the desk, her face a mask of contained frustration. "Sit down, my child," Rose said sweetly, patting the space next to her on the antique sofa. "It's time for you to know your true story." Eleanor cautiously advanced, still holding her notebook like a shield. Edward remained close, while Mary kept a watchful eye on Victoria. "Your mother, Margaret," Rose began, gently stroking Eleanor's hair, "was the brightest in the family. An architect who graduated with honors, she inherited the Morgans' artistic talent. Just like you, my love," she added, pointing to the sketchbook. "What happened to her?" Eleanor asked with a trembling voice. Rose took a framed photograph from a nearby drawer. In it, a young Margaret smiled in front of Cypress Grove Estate, holding some blueprints. "Margaret discovered something on the estate, something your great-grandfather had kept secret. It wasn't just the lands or the property itself, but what he had found beneath it. Precious minerals," Victoria interrupted bitterly. "A fortune buried under those old cypress trees." "Silence," Edward ordered firmly. "You've done enough damage already." Rose continued unfazed. Margaret wanted to use the discovery to benefit the local community. She planned to create a foundation, develop social projects, but there were people who had other plans. "The night she disappeared," Edward intervened, "she was supposed to meet with some alleged investors." "Yes," Rose confirmed, her eyes clouding with the memory. "We later found out that those investors were linked to unscrupulous people. Margaret managed to escape, but she knew they would come after her. And after her baby. Elena clutched the locket tightly. Is that why she left me at the orphanage? To protect you, my love. She left you with the people she trusted most, the Sisters of St. Mary's. Or at least that's what she believed. Rose cast a penetrating glance towards Victoria. Until someone discovered your existence and started moving their pieces. Victoria straightened up, defiant. Everything I did was legal. The donations to the orphanage, the documents. Legal? Edward took a step towards her. Like the poison you tried to give me at the restaurant? You can't prove it, Victoria hissed. Maybe I can, Elena said suddenly, opening her notebook. I've drawn everything I saw at the orphanage. The secret meetings, the documents, even the day I heard about the plan to keep me away from my real family. Victoria visibly paled as Elena showed page after page of detailed drawings, true visual testimonies of years of manipulation and deception. Your mother would be so proud, Rose whispered, hugging Elena. You not only inherited her talent for drawing, but also her courage and sense of justice. But where is she now? Elena asked, her voice breaking slightly. Rose exchanged a significant look with Edward before answering. Your mother settled in Europe, my child. She's been collaborating with international organizations, waiting for the safe moment to return. And now, thanks to your bravery in unmasking Victoria, that moment has finally arrived. Is she alive? Eleanor's eyes filled with tears of hope. And she's never stopped looking for you, Rose confirmed, taking an envelope from her pocket. This letter arrived 3 days ago. Margaret is on her way to America. She doesn't know we've found you. It will be the most beautiful surprise of her life. Victoria tried to take advantage of this emotional moment to slip away, but Mary remained firm in her position. The sound of approaching sirens indicated that the police were arriving. One last thing, Victoria, Edward said, picking up the fake documents from the desk. Who helped you forge all this? Because we know you didn't act alone. Before Victoria could answer, Eleanor spoke. The man from the park, the one who appears in my drawings. I've seen him before, at the orphanage, talking to the Mother Superior. Edward took the notebook and studied the drawing carefully. His expression darkened as he recognized the individual. Of course, now it all makes sense. It's James Ruiz, Edward pronounced gravely, studying the drawing. The family's former lawyer who mysteriously resigned after Margaret's disappearance. Victoria, upon hearing the name, completely lost her composure. You know nothing. Nothing. On the contrary, Rose intervened, rising with dignity from her seat. We know everything, Victoria. Even what you don't know. She headed towards an ancient carved wooden chest in a corner of the room. Margaret left evidence, lots of evidence, before she left. The sound of footsteps approaching through the garden announced the arrival of the police. Mary guided them to the living room while Elena instinctively cuddled closer to Rose. Don't be afraid, Edward whispered to Eleanor. Everything will be all right now. 2 officers entered the room, followed by George, Edward's private investigator, who was carrying a folder in his hands. Mr. Morgan, George greeted, we have all the documentation on the orphanage's irregular transactions and Miss Sinclair's bank movements. Victoria, cornered, tried to keep her last card up her sleeve. What about the girl? Can you really prove she is who you say she is? Rose smiled as she opened the chest. My dear Victoria, do you really think Margaret would have left her daughter unprotected? From inside, she extracted a yellowed envelope. Here is Elena's original birth certificate, along with DNA tests performed in secret, and a notarized letter explaining the entire plan to protect her. Elena observed the scene with bright eyes, processing each new revelation about her identity and her history. You knew all this and still let me search for her? Edward asked his aunt. I needed to be sure the time was right, Rose replied. And when I saw how you protected Elena without knowing who she really was, I knew that moment had come. Victoria was escorted out of the house by the officers, while George handed over the folder with the evidence. However, before crossing the door, she stopped and looked at Elena. You're just like your mother, she said with a mixture of resignation and bitterness. She ruined everything with her sense of justice, too. No, Victoria, Eleanor responded with surprising maturity. My mother didn't ruin anything. She protected what was important, the truth and her family. When the police left, the house fell into a comforting silence. Mary appeared with a tray of hot chocolate and freshly baked cookies, as if trying to restore normalcy to an extraordinary moment. Elena, Rose said softly, There's something else you need to see. She headed to an old photo album. This is your legacy, your history. As Elena turned the pages of the family album, her eyes stopped on each face, on each captured moment. Suddenly, she paused at a particular photograph. This drawing, she said, opening her notebook to a specific page. I drew it months ago from a dream I had. The photograph and the drawing were practically identical. They showed the back garden of Cypress Grove Estate, with a young woman sitting on a bench under a tree drawing. Your mother, Rose confirmed. She used to spend hours drawing in that very spot. It was her favorite corner. Edward, who had been reviewing the documents with George, approached the group. We have enough evidence to press charges not only against Victoria, but also against James Ruiz and the Mother Superior of the orphanage. And my mother, Elena asked hopefully. When will she arrive? Rose checked her antique watch. Her flight lands tomorrow morning in New York City. There's something else, George added, showing his tablet. The police just confirmed that they found the original estate documents in a bank safety deposit box. Victoria had hidden them there. Elena remained silent for a moment, absorbing all the information. Then, with determination, she took her notebook and began a new drawing. What are you drawing? Edward asked curiously. The future, Elena replied with a small smile. A portrait of our entire family, complete at last. Night had fallen over Greenwich, enveloping Rose's house in an atmosphere of sweet anticipation. Mary had prepared Margaret's old room for Eleanor, kept intact all these years as a sanctuary of memories. This was your mother's room when she stayed here, Rose explained as she opened the doors of a mahogany wardrobe. And look at this. From inside, she extracted a carved wooden box. Upon opening it, she revealed a set of professional drawing brushes and materials, perfectly preserved. The last gift I gave Margaret before she had to leave, Rose sighed. Now they belong to you, my child. Elena caressed the brushes with reverence. They're beautiful, she whispered, her eyes shining with contained emotion. Edward, who was observing from the doorframe, couldn't help but smile at the scene. In less than 24 hours, his family had grown in ways he never could have imagined. Eleanor, he called softly, would you like to go out to the garden for a moment? There's something I'd like to show you. The girl nodded, carefully storing the brushes in their box. Together they went down to the back garden, where the full moon bathed everything in its silver light. Do you see that star? Edward pointed to the night sky. Your mother and I used to look for it when we were children. We said it was our lucky star. Were you close? Eleanor asked, sitting on a stone bench. Like siblings, Edward replied, his eyes lost in memories. Margaret was more than my cousin. She was my best friend, my confidant. When she disappeared, a part of me went with her. Eleanor took out her notebook and began to draw the night scene. Is that why Victoria managed to deceive you? Because you were sad? Edward was surprised by the insight of the question. I suppose so. Victoria appeared at a time when I felt very lonely. But you, he smiled, gently touching Eleanor's nose, reminded me that true family never really abandons us. From the upper terrace, Rose observed the scene while speaking on the phone in a low voice. Yes, Margaret, everything is ready for tomorrow. No, don't worry, nobody suspects anything. It will be the most beautiful surprise of your life, niece. Your little Elena is extraordinary. She has your same spirit. In the kitchen, Mary prepared hot chocolate while humming an old lullaby. George, seated at the kitchen table, reviewed the final security details for the next day. The airport is covered, he reported to Edward when he entered with Elena. Victoria is still in custody and James Ruiz has been located trying to leave the country. They detained him at the border. Are they afraid someone might try something tomorrow? Elena asked, blowing on her hot chocolate. It's just precaution, my love, Rose replied, joining them in the kitchen. Tomorrow will be a very special day and we want everything to be perfect. Eleanor nodded, but her hand trembled slightly as she held the cup. What if I'm not what she expects? Silence fell over the kitchen. Edward knelt in front of her, taking her small hands in his. Elena Margaret Morgan, he said firmly, you are more than anyone could expect. You are brave, intelligent, and have a huge heart. Your mother will be more than proud. Besides, Rose added with a mischievous smile, who else could have drawn their whole story without even knowing it? That, my child, is the true Morgan spirit. Elena finally smiled, taking out her notebook once more. On its pages, a new drawing began to take shape. The airport, a crowd, and in the center, two figures approaching, their arms extended towards each other. "Is this how you imagine the moment?" Edward asked softly. "No," Eleanor replied, adding more details to the drawing. "This is how I dreamed it last night, and my dream, lately they're coming true." The morning dawned with a clear sky over New York City. John F. Kennedy International Airport bustled with activity, but for Elena, time seemed to move in slow motion. Dressed in one of her new dresses, a perfectly woven braid by Mary, and the locket shining on her chest, she waited alongside Edward in the VIP lounge. "The flight just landed," George announced, checking his phone. 20 minutes maximum." Elena clutched her notebook tighter. Rose, seated beside her, took her hand gently. "Breathe, my child," she whispered. "Everything will be fine. What if she doesn't recognize me?" Elena's voice trembled slightly. Edward smiled tenderly. "Elena, you're identical to her at your age. Besides," he added, pointing to the locket, "you carry the most important proof with you." The minutes passed with excruciating slowness. Elena had opened her notebook and was drawing frenetically, as she always did when she was nervous. Suddenly she stopped abruptly, her pencil suspended in the air. "She's here," she whispered before anyone else could notice. And indeed, coming through the international arrivals gates, appeared a woman who looked like an adult version of Eleanor. Margaret Morgan walked with a firm step, though her eyes revealed the contained emotion of someone returning home after a long exile. Time seemed to stand still. Margaret stopped halfway, her eyes meeting Eleanor's. The locket shone under the airport lights like a sign of destiny. "Elena," the name escaped Margaret's lips like a prayer. Elena stood up slowly, her notebook falling to the floor, scattering drawings everywhere. One of them, the one she had just made, showed exactly this scene. Mother and daughter separated by a few meters, about to reunite after so long. Margaret took a step forward, then another, her eyes never leaving her daughter's. "My little one, my love." And then, as if an invisible force pushed them, they both ran towards each other. The embrace that followed contained years of absence, of dreams, of hope. "Mom," Eleanor sobbed, burying her face in Margaret's embrace. "My life, my treasure." Margaret held her as if she feared she would disappear. "Forgive me, please forgive me for leaving you." "I knew you would come," Eleanor replied through tears. "I drew it, I dreamed it." Margaret separated slightly to look at her daughter's face, memorizing every detail. Her eyes stopped on the locket. "You kept it," she whispered in amazement. "It was the only thing I had of you," Elena responded. "That and the dreams and the drawings." Margaret looked at the drawings scattered on the floor. Edward and Rose, discreetly, had begun to pick them up. Seeing the images, Margaret's eyes filled with new tears. "The estate, the garden, even the bench where I used to draw." Her voice broke. "How? It's a gift," Rose explained, approaching to embrace her niece. "Like yours. The Morgans have always had a special connection with art and memories." "And with justice," Edward added, joining the group. "Your daughter not only inherited your talent, Margaret, she also inherited your courage." Margaret looked questioningly at her cousin, and Elena proceeded to tell her about Victoria, the restaurant, and how she had recognized the danger that night. "So, I not only found you," Margaret smiled, caressing her daughter's face, "but you also saved the family." "Like you did years ago," Elena replied. "Aunt Rose told me why you had to leave." "To protect me." Margaret nodded solemnly. "Every day away from you was torture, but I knew that as long as Victoria and her accomplices were pursuing me, you wouldn't be safe. I needed to gather the necessary evidence to stop them." "And now they're detained," George confirmed from a prudent distance. "Victoria, Ruiz, all of them." "It's time to go home," Margaret said, taking her daughter's hand. "We have so much time to make up for." Elena picked up her notebook and extracted the last drawing she had made. In it, a complete family posed in front of the restored Cypress Grove estate, with the ancient cypress trees swaying in the wind. "Is this how you see it?" Margaret asked sweetly. "This is how it will be," Elena responded with conviction. "I've dreamed it." The journey back to Greenwich became a trip full of shared stories. Margaret and Elena traveled in the back seat of Edward's Mercedes, their hands intertwined as if they feared separating again. "This drawing," Margaret flipped through the pages of Elena's notebook with her free hand, "is exactly how my studio in Paris looked." "How could you capture it in such detail?" I dreamed it 3 months ago, Elena replied. There was a table by the window overlooking an old church, and there were always fresh lavender bouquets. I bought them every week at the flower market, Margaret completed, amazed. It was my little ritual to feel closer to home, closer to you. From the driver's seat, Edward smiled, observing the scene in the rearview mirror. Rose, seated beside him, discreetly wiped away a tear. "And this one?" Margaret asked, pausing at a particular drawing. It was a sketch of a hidden safe behind a painting in Cypress Grove Estate. "That was the first one I drew after escaping from the orphanage," Elena explained. "I didn't understand why I kept dreaming about that house, that safe." "That's where your grandfather kept the most important documents," Margaret revealed, "including the evidence of what we discovered under the estate." "The minerals," Elena murmured. "Not just minerals, my love," Margaret gently corrected. "We discovered an aquifer, a source of pure water that could supply the entire region. Your grandfather always said that the true treasure of the earth wasn't gold, but water. That's why Victoria was so interested," Edward intervened. "Water will be the most valuable resource in the coming decades." Eleanor processed this information, while absent-mindedly drawing on a new page. Under her pencil, an image of the estate, transformed into something new, began to take shape. "What are you drawing now?" Margaret asked curiously. "The future," Elena replied without stopping drawing. "I see the estate turned into a center for research and sustainable development, with community gardens, water purification systems, and a space to teach art to children in the region." Margaret exchanged an emotional look with Rose and Edward. "That's exactly what I dreamed of doing," she whispered. "As I said," Rose smiled, "the Morgan spirit runs strong in her veins." Upon arriving at Rose's house, Mary was waiting for them with a special meal prepared. The dining room table was set with the best tablecloths and the family's antique china. "Welcome home, Miss Margaret," Mary greeted with tears in her eyes. "And welcome, little Eleanor." During lunch, as the family shared stories and future plans, George received a call that put everyone on alert. "Victoria is requesting a hearing," he reported after hanging up. "She says she has crucial information about the estate and James Ruiz's true plans." "No more secrets," Margaret declared firmly, squeezing Elena's hand. "It's time for the whole truth to come to light." Elena, who had been drawing during the conversation, showed her latest creation. Victoria seated in an interrogation room with an expression of defeat and regret. "Do you think she'll tell the truth?" Edward asked. "She will," Elena replied confidently. "In my drawing, she's crying. And in all these years living on the street, I learned to recognize when tears are genuine." Margaret hugged her daughter with pride. "My little artist, so observant, so wise." "Just like her mother," Rose added. "But now, family, we have an important decision to make. Are we ready to reopen Cypress Grove Estate?" Elena raised her notebook, showing the drawing of the Research and Development Center. "I say yes. It's time for dreams to come true." "The good dreams," Margaret specified, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Those born of love and justice." The interrogation room at the Greenwich police station was exactly as Elena had drawn it. Victoria, stripped of her usual elegance, waited seated behind a metal table. Her face showed signs of sleepless nights and deep resignation. Edward and Margaret had decided to confront her together, while Elena waited in the adjoining office with Rose, observing everything through the one-way mirror. "It's just like your drawing," Rose whispered, embracing her great niece. Victoria looked up when Edward and Margaret entered the room. For a moment, she seemed to lose her composure upon seeing Margaret. "So you really came back," she murmured. "I never really left," Margaret replied calmly. "I was always watching, protecting what I loved most." "Victoria," Edward intervened, "you said you had information about James Ruiz's true plans." "It's time for the truth." Victoria took a deep breath, her hands intertwined on the table, trembling slightly. "It all started 15 years ago," she began. "James discovered the studies about the aquifer while reviewing the estate documents, but it wasn't the water that interested him." "What do you mean?" Margaret asked. "The geological studies revealed something else." "Beneath the aquifer, there's a deposit of rare earth elements, minerals essential for modern technology. James had been secretly working with an international corporation. The plan was to acquire the estate property at any cost." In the adjoining room, Elena began to draw frantically in her notebook. Rose watched in amazement, as the girl's pencil revealed images of hidden documents and secret meetings she had never witnessed. "They recruited me because they knew about my ambition," Victoria continued. "They promised me a fortune if I could get Edward to marry me. The Morgan inheritance could only pass to family members." "And Elena?" Margaret asked, her voice tense. "Why involve the orphanage?" Tears began to roll down Victoria's cheeks just as Elena had drawn. "At first we just wanted to keep her away. But then I met her. I visited the orphanage regularly, observed her from afar. She was so much like you, Margaret. So talented, so special." "Why didn't you stop everything then?" Edward asked. "Fear," Victoria answered simply. "James isn't someone you can easily betray. When Elena escaped from the orphanage, he panicked. He feared that somehow she would find her way to you." "And she did," Margaret smiled. "Fate has a peculiar way of correcting injustices." Victoria nodded, wiping away her tears. "The night at the restaurant, when I saw her there warning Edward, I knew it was all over. But I was already too involved, too committed. At that moment, George rushed into the observation room. "We have James," he announced. "International police intercepted him in Panama. And they found something else. A USB drive with all the documents of the plan, including bank transfers and communications with the international corporation." Elena lifted her notebook, showing a new drawing. A handcuffed man, descending from a plane, with a USB drive falling from his pocket. "Did you draw it before it happened?" Rose asked, amazed. "No," Elena replied with a small smile. "I'm drawing it as it happens. It's different this time. They're no longer dreams of the past, but visions of the present." In the interrogation room, Victoria had completely broken down. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. Elena is an extraordinary child. I spent years watching her at the orphanage, seeing how she drew things she couldn't have seen, places she couldn't have known. I should have known it was a sign." Margaret stood up from her chair. "Sincere repentance is the first step towards redemption, Victoria. But there's something I need to know. What happened to the Mother Superior?" "She didn't know the whole truth," Victoria answered. "We told her Elena was in danger and that we needed to protect her. We paid her to keep the secret, but she really believed she was helping." Eleanor, who had been listening attentively, began a new drawing. Cypress Grove Estate restored, with a group of orphanage children playing in the gardens. "Sometimes," she said softly, "forgiveness can build something more beautiful than revenge." A month after Victoria's confession, the Morgan family was gathered in the garden of Rose's house. The fresh morning air brought with it the scent of newly opened flowers, while Elena worked on a new drawing, seated on her mother's favorite bench. "The architects arrived at the estate this morning," Edward announced, checking his tablet. "The restoration project can begin next week." Margaret, who was seated next to her daughter watching her draw, smiled. "Did you show them the plans we designed?" "Yes, and they were impressed," Edward replied. "Especially with the modifications Elena suggested for the educational center area." Elena looked up from her drawing. "Are they really going to build the glass greenhouse, like I drew it?" "Exactly as you drew it, my love," Margaret confirmed, stroking her daughter's hair. "It will be a space where children can learn about sustainable agriculture and water care." Rose joined them, bringing a tray with fresh lemonade. "Victoria called this morning," she announced in a neutral tone. Everyone tensed slightly, but Eleanor continued drawing calmly. "She's been fully cooperating with the authorities," Rose continued. "Thanks to her testimony, they've been able to trace all of James Ruiz's connections with the international corporation." "What will happen to her?" Elena asked without stopping drawing. "The judge will consider her cooperation and repentance," Edward replied. "She'll probably face a reduced sentence with community service." Eleanor nodded, giving the final touches to her drawing. When she turned it to show everyone, an astonished silence fell over the group. The drawing showed Victoria, dressed simply, teaching art to a group of children in what appeared to be the new educational center of the estate. "Elena," Margaret began, but her daughter gently interrupted her. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Mom. You taught me that when you left me at the orphanage to protect me. It wasn't abandonment, it was an act of love." Margaret hugged her daughter tightly, holding back tears. "How did you become so wise, my little one?" "The street teaches many things," Eleanor replied, "but mainly, it teaches you to see people's hearts. Victoria did bad things, but her heart isn't bad, she was just lost." George arrived at that moment, bringing more news. The Mother Superior has agreed to collaborate on the new project. She says she wants to make up for her mistakes by helping to establish the educational program on the estate. Excellent, Rose smiled. Her experience will be valuable. Elena began a new drawing, her strokes sure and determined. As she worked, she shared an idea that had been maturing in her mind. What if the center isn't just for children from the region? What if we also invite children from the orphanage? We could have special programs for them, art classes, music. It's a wonderful idea, Margaret replied. The estate was always meant to be a place of healing and renewal. What better way to honor that purpose? Edward approached Elena's drawing in progress. What are you creating now? The future, she replied with a smile. Look. The drawing showed the estate in full operation. The greenhouse full of plants, water purification systems working, children learning in different workshops, and a special detail, a huge mural on one of the walls painted by the children themselves. And this, she pointed to a corner of the drawing where a group of people was gathered, is our family, all of us, including those who lost their way but are finding their way back. Margaret exchanged a significant look with Edward and Rose. Are you thinking the same thing I am? That my great-niece has just designed not only an educational center, but a healing project for the entire community? Rose smiled. Yes, that exactly. The Morgans have always had the gift of seeing beyond the obvious, Edward reflected. But Elena, she sees directly into the heart of things. Eleanor, who had begun another drawing, smiled without looking up. It's not just seeing, Uncle Edward, it's believing. Believing that even the saddest stories can have a happy ending if we dare to draw a new one. Cypress Grove Estate began to awaken from its long slumber. The sound of construction machinery mingled with birdsong as workers began the restoration work. Elena, seated under one of the ancient cypress trees, captured every moment of the transformation in her notebook. Are you sure you want to do this? Margaret asked, approaching her daughter with 2 cups of hot chocolate. The morning was cool, and the steam emanating from the cups danced in the air. Completely sure, Mom, Eleanor replied, accepting her cup. Victoria needs to know that we forgive her. In the distance, a car approached on the gravel path. Edward and 2 officers were escorting Victoria, who had received special permission to visit the estate and contribute to the restoration project. Victoria looked different. Her elegant designer clothes had been replaced by jeans and a simple blouse. Her face, free of makeup, showed a vulnerability she had never before allowed others to see. Good morning, she greeted timidly, her eyes avoiding direct contact with Margaret and Elena. Good morning, Victoria, Elena responded, standing up and offering her open notebook. I want to show you something. Victoria took the notebook with trembling hands. On its pages, Eleanor had drawn a series of scenes. Victoria teaching art to children, helping in the greenhouse, genuinely smiling while sharing with others. This is... Victoria couldn't contain her tears. Is this how you see me? This is how you can be, Eleanor replied softly. If you choose it. Margaret approached, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Elena has a special gift, Victoria, not just for seeing the future, but for seeing the best in people, even when they can't see it themselves. I don't deserve it, Victoria whispered. After everything I did. Forgiveness isn't something you deserve, Edward intervened. It's a gift that's given freely, and an opportunity that should be seized. Victoria looked around, observing the estate she had once coveted. Now she saw it with different eyes, not as a source of wealth, but as a place of healing and hope. The architects need help with the design of the artistic area, Eleanor commented casually. Someone who understands aesthetics and beauty. Victoria looked at her, surprised. Are you suggesting that You were the best interior designer in the city, Edward pointed out. That talent can be used for something positive now. At that moment, a group of children from the local orphanage, who had been invited to visit the estate, ran by near them, laughing and playing. One of them stopped when he saw Elena's notebook. Are you the girl who draws the future? He asked with bright eyes. The sisters told us about you. Elena smiled and tore out a clean page from her notebook, offering it to the boy along with a pencil. Would you like to draw your own future? The boy nodded enthusiastically and sat on the ground, beginning to draw. Soon other children joined, forming an impromptu circle of young artists. Victoria observed the scene with a mixture of amazement and emotion. I used to love art, you know, before money and ambition ruined everything. It's never too late to start over, Margaret said. The estate has always been a place of second chances. My grandfather used to say that every cypress planted here represented a story of renewal. Elena had begun a new drawing, the estate fully restored, with the cypress trees taller and more lush than ever, and a new garden full of flowers of all colors. The water from the aquifer, she explained, won't just serve the community, it will also make everything bloom again. Like the people who come here, with a little care and love they can flourish once more. Victoria knelt beside the children, observing their drawings with genuine interest. For the first time in years, she felt a peace that no material wealth could have provided her. "Will you teach me?" she asked Eleanor. "Not just to draw, but to see the world as you see it." Eleanor shared a knowing look with her mother before responding, "Only if you promise to help me make all these drawings come true." A month had passed since work began at Cypress Grove Estate. The old building was regaining its splendor under the morning sun, while new modern structures integrated harmoniously with the original architecture. Victoria, wearing a safety helmet and holding blueprints in her hands, supervised the installation of the greenhouse windows. "The glass must be at exactly this angle," she explained to the workers, pointing to the designs. Elena drew it this way so that natural light illuminates the plants for most of the day. From her spot under the oldest cypress, Elena smiled as she drew the scene. Margaret, seated beside her reviewing documents, observed in amazement the transformation not only of the estate, but of the people involved in the project. "Who would have thought Victoria would end up being one of the most committed to the restoration?" Margaret commented. "I imagined it," Elena replied without stopping drawing. "Or rather, I saw it. People are like these lands, Mom. Sometimes they just need the opportunity to bloom." At that moment, a group of children from the orphanage arrived for their weekly art class. The Mother Superior, who now actively collaborated with the project, guided them towards the temporary workshop area. "Eleanor, Eleanor," the children called out enthusiastically, "will you show us more drawing tricks today?" Elena closed her notebook and stood up. "Even better," she replied with a smile. "Today we'll have a special teacher." She looked towards where Victoria was supervising the works. "Victoria, are you ready for your first class?" Victoria seemed momentarily nervous but nodded and approached the group. "I've been practicing with the designs you showed me," she said to Elena as she took out her own sketchbook. The children settled in a circle as Victoria, with growing confidence, began to explain the basic principles of perspective and light. Elena sat among them like just another student, though occasionally exchanging knowing glances with Victoria when she incorporated some of the techniques they had been practicing together. Edward, arriving for a meeting with the hydraulic project engineers, stopped to observe the scene. Rose, who came with him, smiled with satisfaction. "The estate's true treasure," Rose murmured, "was never the water or the minerals. It was this, the ability to transform lives." "Elena knew it from the beginning," Edward replied. "That's why her drawings always showed something more than restored buildings." The art class developed with enthusiasm. Victoria had lost her initial nervousness and now gestured animatedly as she explained how to capture the texture of the cypress trees on paper. The children listened attentively, captivated by her newly discovered passion for teaching. "Every stroke tells a story," Victoria explained. "Like these century-old cypresses, they've seen generations of Morgans pass through these lands. They've witnessed joys and sorrows, and here they still stand, strong and beautiful." Margaret approached Edward and Rose quietly. "You know, when I was a child, my father used to say that the cypresses were the estate's guardians. Now I understand he wasn't just referring to the trees." Eleanor had begun a new drawing. In it, the greenhouse appeared finished, brimming with life. But the most striking thing was how she had captured the light. Not only the light entering through the glass, but the light that seemed to emanate from the people working and learning inside. "The guardians are all of us," Elena said, showing her drawing. "Every person who comes here with an open heart to change, willing to learn and teach." Victoria approached to see the drawing, and her eyes moistened upon seeing herself represented in it, surrounded by children, with an expression of peace she had until recently believed impossible to achieve. "Thank you," she whispered to Elena, "for seeing in me what I couldn't see myself." "Don't thank me yet," Eleanor replied with a mischievous smile. "Wait until you see the drawings I have planned for the next phase of the project. We'll need many more art classes." Victoria's laughter blended with that of the children. floating in the air like a promise of better days to come. The cypresses swayed gently in the breeze, as if nodding in silent approval. The news arrived on a sunny morning, as Elena and Victoria prepared materials for the day's art class. George appeared at the estate with a folder of official documents under his arm. "The judge has made a decision," he announced, handing the papers to Edward. "Considering Victoria's cooperation and her work on the project, they've significantly reduced her sentence. She'll be able to continue her work here at the estate under supervision." Victoria, who had been holding her breath, let out a sob of relief. Eleanor immediately hugged her, accidentally staining her blouse with paint from her hands. "I told you," Eleanor whispered. "My drawing showed it like this." Margaret, who had been observing from the estate's porch, approached the group. "Victoria, there's something else we want to discuss with you." Edward nodded, taking out another set of documents from his briefcase. "We've been talking with the Foundation's Board of Directors. We want you to officially join the team as Director of the Art and Design Program." Victoria looked around, confused. "But after everything I did..." "Second chances aren't just pretty words here," Rose intervened, who had just arrived. "They're the very heart of this place." At that moment, a bus stopped in front of the estate. It was the first official visit of children from the local school system, part of the new educational program. Elena ran to her favorite spot under the cypress and opened her notebook, ready to capture the moment. The children got off in orderly groups, their eyes bright with excitement at seeing the glass greenhouse and emerging gardens. The Mother Superior, who now coordinated the educational visits, guided them with a serene smile. "Welcome to Cypress Grove Estate," Victoria began, her voice finding a new confidence. "Here we'll learn that art isn't just on paper or canvas, but in the way we see and care for the world around us." Elena drew quickly, her sure strokes capturing not just the physical scene, but the energy and emotion of the moment. In her drawing, the lines of light passing through the greenhouse seemed to connect all the people present, creating an invisible network of hope and renewal. "Look at this," one of the visiting children pointed out, noticing the first sprouts in the community garden. "The plants are growing." "Like us," Elena replied, without looking up from her drawing. "We're all growing here." Margaret approached her daughter and observed the drawing in progress. In it, Victoria appeared surrounded by an aura of light as she guided the children, her hands gesturing passionately as she explained something about shapes in nature. "It's amazing," Margaret murmured, "how your drawings capture not just what you see, but what people can become." "It's a gift," Elena replied, adding more details, "like the water under the estate. It just needs to find its way to the surface to give life." Edward joined them, bringing more news. "The water analysis laboratory is almost finished. Soon we'll be able to start studies for the community distribution project." "And the research center?" Elena asked, though her pencil was already drawing the answer. "The universities are very interested," Edward smiled. "We'll have students and researchers working here sooner than we thought." Victoria, who had finished organizing the groups of children with the Mother Superior, approached the Morgan group timidly. "There's something I want to show you," she said, taking out her own sketchbook. "I've been working on some designs for the community center mural." Eleanor put down her drawing and approached with curiosity. Victoria's sketches showed a surprising evolution. They were no longer just technically perfect designs, but had soul, showing the estate's history and its transformation into a place of healing and hope. "It's beautiful," Eleanor whispered. "You've learned to see with your heart." The great mural of the community center was beginning to take shape under the diligent hands of Victoria and her young apprentices. Elena observed from her usual spot, capturing the transformation process in her notebook. The design, a collaboration between Victoria and the children, showed the estate's history, from the ancient cypresses to the new Sustainable Development Center. "Eleanor, come help us," Victoria called, holding a brush dripping with bright blue paint. "This part needs your magic touch." Elena smiled and approached the mural. It was surprising how Victoria, once so controlling and perfectionist, now found joy in the children's spontaneous creativity. "Look what I found," Margaret announced, entering the room with an old box. Photos and documents from when grandfather started planting the first cypresses. The children gathered around as Margaret spread the photographs on a nearby table. In one of them, an older man smiled next to a small newly planted tree. "That cypress," Elena pointed out, "is the same one I sit under to draw, isn't it?" That's right, Margaret confirmed. Your great-grandfather used to say that each cypress was a guardian of dreams. And look at this. She took out an old worn notebook. His project diary for the estate. Eleanor took the notebook reverently. The pages were full of sketches and annotations, not unlike her own. He drew the future too, she whispered. The Morgan gift, Rose smiled, who had just entered. Seeing beyond the obvious. Victoria approached the group timidly, her hands stained with paint. There's something I'd like to show you, she said, guiding them to a section of the mural she had been working on in secret. In it she had painted Elena under the ancient cypress, surrounded by children drawing. But the most surprising thing was how she had captured the light. It seemed to emanate from Elena herself, extending to everyone around her. Victoria, Margaret was speechless. It's how she sees all of us, Victoria explained softly, with infinite possibilities, with inner light. I wanted to capture that, to show how a little girl changed so many lives with her way of seeing the world. Elena observed the mural with bright eyes. Something's missing, she finally said, taking a brush. With sure strokes, she added the figure of Victoria, teaching a group of children, her own light blending with that of the others. We're all guardians now, Eleanor explained as she painted. Like the cypresses. Edward entered at that moment, accompanied by George and a group of people no one recognized. Let me introduce you to the UNESCO representatives, he announced. They're interested in including our project in their Sustainable Development Program. The visitors observed in amazement the mural and the activity in the center. One of them stopped in front of Elena and Victoria's work. Extraordinary, he commented. The integration of art with social and environmental development, it's exactly the kind of innovative project we're looking to support. Victoria, who had once pursued recognition and status for the wrong reasons, now blushed at the sincere praise. All the credit goes to Elena, she said. She taught us to see the beauty in transformation. No, Elena corrected, the credit belongs to everyone. Each person here has contributed to making these drawings a reality. The Mother Superior, who had been observing in silence, approached with tears in her eyes. When I think about how all this started, about the mistakes we made, and look now. The estate isn't just restoring water and land, it's restoring souls. Eleanor had begun a new drawing. In it, the mural came to life. Its figures seemed to move and grow, as if the estate itself was breathing and evolving. What do you see in the future now? Margaret asked her daughter. Elena smiled, adding more color to her drawing. I see more stories to tell, more lives to transform. And above all, I see that dreams, when shared, multiply. A week after the UNESCO visit, Cypress Grove Estate was preparing for its first graduation. It wasn't a traditional graduation, it was a celebration of transformation, marking the end of the first cycle of the program and the beginning of something new. The Theatre of Dreams had been decorated with garlands of wildflowers and soft lights. The 30 children, dressed in colorful robes they had designed themselves, waited excitedly for the ceremony to begin. Eleanor, seated in her usual spot under the cypress, was drawing frenetically in her notebook. This time, however, something was different. Each child had contributed a small detail to the drawing, turning the work into a true collaboration. It's as if we've all learned to see the future, Anna commented, observing the drawing in progress. You always could, Eleanor replied with a smile. You just needed to remember how to dream. Victoria approached the group, carrying a mysterious box. Eleanor, do you remember the first day we met at the restaurant? How could I forget? Eleanor replied, exchanging a significant look with her mother. That day I thought I had lost everything, Victoria continued, opening the box. But in reality it was the day I found my true purpose. From the box she took out 30 handcrafted notebooks, each one unique and personalized. A gift for each of you, to keep drawing your dreams wherever you go. The children approached in wonder. Each notebook had the name of its recipient engraved on the cover, along with a small drawing representing their special contribution to the estate. Margaret, observing the scene, approached Edward. Who would have imagined that night at the restaurant would lead us to this? Elena imagined it, Edward replied with a smile. Or rather, she drew it. The ceremony began at sunset. Rose, as matriarch of the Morgan family, took her place at the center of the stage. When my father planted the first cypress, she began, he said each tree would be a guardian of a dream. Today I see he was right. but in a way not even he could have imagined. Each of you is now a guardian of a collective dream. One by one, the children went up on stage. Instead of traditional diplomas, each presented their contribution to the great mural and shared their vision for the future. Miguel showed how his sculpture in the mural had blossomed, with small real plants growing among the clay. Anna presented her water crystals, which now formed a kaleidoscope of colors when light passed through them. When Elena's turn came, she went up on stage with her notebook and opened it to a blank page. "For a long time," she said, "I thought my gift was seeing the future. But now I understand that the real gift is helping others see their own futures. That's why this page is blank. Because we'll all write the next chapter together." Victoria, who had been holding back tears, approached the stage with surprising news. "UNESCO has not only approved the expansion of the program," she announced, "they've also requested that we create an educational model based on our experience to share with similar projects around the world." Applause and cheers filled the Theatre of Dreams. Elena began to draw on the blank page, but this time it was different. Each stroke seemed to come to life on its own, glowing with an inner light that extended beyond the limits of the paper. "What are you drawing?" Margaret asked, approaching her daughter. "The future," Elena replied, "but not just ours. It's the future of all those who will come after, of all the dreams that have yet to be dreamed." In the drawing, Cypress Grove Estate appeared as a giant tree, its roots extending throughout the world, each branch a new project, each leaf a new story of transformation. "Dreams," Elena said, completing her drawing, "are like cypresses. Once they take root, they grow towards the sky without limits." The graduation night transformed into a magical celebration under the stars. Colored lanterns illuminated the estate's paths, and the air was filled with soft music and laughter. At the center of the Theatre of Dreams, the great mural shone with its own light, each piece telling its part of the collective story. Helena, seated in her special place under the century-old cypress, worked on her last drawing. This time, however, she wasn't alone. Around her, 30 children drew in their new notebooks, each adding their vision to the future they were creating together. "You know something curious," Margaret said, sitting next to her daughter. "When I left you at the orphanage that rainy night, my biggest fear was that you'd lose your ability to dream. But not only did you keep it, you taught others to dream too." Victoria approached, followed by Edward and Rose. "And some of us desperately needed to remember how to do it," she added with a humble smile. Eleanor looked up from her drawing. "Dreams are never really lost," she said wisely. "Sometimes they just need a safe place to flourish, like cypress seeds." At that moment, Miguel came running with an exciting discovery. "Eleanor, look!" In his hand, he held a small cypress cone that had begun to open, revealing the tiny seeds inside. "Life finds its way," Rose smiled. "As my father used to say, each seed is a dream waiting for its moment to grow." Anna, who had been working in the laboratory until late, joined the group with surprising news. "The aquifer water. We've discovered it has unique properties. The plants that grow with it are stronger, more resistant. Like the people who find their way here," Victoria observed, looking significantly at the mural that now extended throughout the estate. Eleanor continued drawing, her strokes sure and full of purpose. In her new drawing, Cypress Grove Estate appeared as never before, not just as a physical place but as a beacon of hope, its rays of light extending towards the infinite horizon. "What do you see in the future now?" Edward asked softly. Elena smiled, showing her drawing. "I see more stories to tell, more lives to transform. I see the estate turned into a place where dreams not only come true but multiply." Margaret took the small cypress cone from Miguel's hands and held it up. "Like these seeds, each dream realized here will plant new dreams in other places." Victoria, who had been unusually silent, stepped forward. "And some of us," she said with an emotional voice, "will find redemption by helping others find their way." The children had gathered around, each holding their new notebook, each with their own dreams drawn on the pages. Elena looked at them all, one by one, remembering how each individual story had been interwoven into this great tapestry of hope and renewal. "You know what's most beautiful?" Elena said, beginning a new drawing, the last one. "That this story doesn't end here. Each of you will carry a piece of the estate with you, and wherever you go, you'll plant new seeds of hope." In her final drawing, Eleanor captured not just the estate and its current inhabitants, but also the infinite possibilities extending into the future. New children arriving, new programs flourishing, new dreams taking shape. "The cypresses," Rose said, looking towards the century-old trees that had witnessed everything, "are guardians of time. They've seen the past and will see the future. But their true gift is teaching us to live in the present, to grow towards the light, no matter where we're planted." As the night progressed, the celebration continued under the stars. The lanterns glowed like fireflies among the cypresses, and the air was filled with promises and possibilities. In the theater of dreams, 30 young voices joined to sing a song they had composed together, a melody that spoke of hope, of transformation, and of shared dreams. Helena closed her notebook, but not before adding a final line to her last drawing. A small cypress sprouting from a seed, its roots intertwined with all the stories that had come before, its branches extending towards all the stories that were yet to come. "Because dreams," she whispered as a shooting star crossed the night sky, "are like infinity, without beginning or end, just an eternal cycle of renewal and hope." As the celebration wound down and the last of the lanterns flickered in the night breeze, Elena found herself alone under her favorite cypress tree. The estate was quiet now, save for the soft rustling of leaves and the distant murmur of the aquifer flowing beneath their feet. She opened her notebook one last time, flipping through the pages that chronicled not just her journey, but the transformation of Cypress Grove Estate and everyone connected to it. Each drawing was a testament to the power of dreams, hope, and second chances. "Couldn't sleep." Margaret's soft voice broke through Eleanor's reverie as she approached, wrapping a warm shawl around her daughter's shoulders. Eleanor smiled, leaning into her mother's embrace. "I was just thinking about everything that's happened. It feels like a dream, but—" She gestured to the estate around them. "It's all real." Margaret nodded, her eyes scanning the grounds that had once been a source of conflict, but now stood as a beacon of hope. "Your great-grandfather always said that the estate had a spirit of its own. I think he was right, and you were the one who could hear it best." As if on cue, a gentle breeze rustled through the cypress, carrying with it the scent of new growth and possibility. "Mom," Eleanor said, her voice tinged with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty, "I had a new dream last night. It was different from the others." Margaret listened intently as Elena described her vision. Cypress Grove Estate was no longer just a single location, but had sprouted branches across the country, even reaching to other parts of the world. In each new location, a cypress tree stood tall, surrounded by children learning, creating, and healing. "It's like the estate wants to grow," Elena explained, her pencil flying across a fresh page in her notebook. "Not just here, but everywhere it's needed." As the drawing took shape, Margaret recognized the outline of cities and landscapes far beyond their small corner of the world. "Elena, this is incredible, but it's also a huge undertaking." "I know," Elena nodded, her eyes never leaving the page. "But isn't that what we've been preparing for? Everything we've learned here, everything we've built, it's meant to be shared." Edward and Victoria, having noticed the light under the cypress, joined them, their faces a mix of curiosity and awe as they saw Elena's latest creation. "What do we have here?" Edward asked, his voice hushed with wonder. Eleanor explained her vision, her words painting a picture as vivid as her drawings. As she spoke, a spark of excitement ignited in Victoria's eyes. "The educational model we developed for UNESCO," Victoria breathed. "It could be adapted for each new location. And with the resources from the aquifer, we could fund it," Edward finished, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Create a network of healing centers, each one tailored to its community, but connected by the same principles we've established here." Rose, who had been listening silently from the shadows, stepped forward. "It's exactly what your great-grandfather would have wanted," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He always said the true purpose of wealth was to nurture dreams and heal wounds." As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, the group stood together, united by a vision that stretched far beyond the boundaries of Cypress Grove Estate. Elena's drawing, now complete, showed a world interconnected by roots of compassion and branches of hope, each leaf a story of transformation. "So," Elena said, looking at each face in turn, "are we ready for our next adventure?" The response was unanimous, a chorus of yes that seemed to resonate with the very earth beneath their feet. In that moment, As the sun rose over Cypress Grove Estate, casting long shadows from the cypress trees, Elena realized that this wasn't an ending at all. It was a new beginning, a fresh page in a story that would continue to unfold in ways she had only begun to dream. She picked up her pencil once more, ready to sketch the first lines of their next chapter. As she did, she felt the weight of the locket against her chest, a reminder of where she had come from and a guide for where she was going. "Remember," Margaret said softly, placing a hand on Elena's shoulder, "every great journey begins with a single step, or in your case, a single line." Eleanor nodded, her pencil touching paper. And as she began to draw, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their roots strong, their spirits unbreakable, ready to bring hope and healing to a world in need of both. The cypress trees stood tall around them, silent guardians of dreams yet to be dreamed and stories yet to be told. And in the heart of Cypress Grove Estate, a new day dawned, full of promise and possibility.